Welcome by the video series on the Global Guideline Candidiasis. This Global Guideline was recently published in the Lancet Infectious Diseases, and I'm together with Zhang, one of the co-authors of this guideline. And together we present here about the taxonomic revisions that have been highlighted in this guidelines document. In this new guideline document, there's a table with approximately 30 Candida species that have been recently renamed. Among them are very well-known species like Candida auris that has been renamed in Candidocyma auris, and Candida glabrata renamed to Narcosaomyces glabrata, but also the well-known Candida lusitaniae that was some time ago renamed to Clavispora lusitaniae. So what are the reasons for these name changes? There are basically two major drivers for this. One of them is the One Fungus is One Name initiative that was embraced more than a decade ago. It basically means that we have no longer dual naming for fungi, so not a separate name for the asexual and for the sexual phase of a fungus. The other major reason is that due to the impact of DNA sequencing, we now know that species that were in the past phenotypically different are basically one and the same species. A good example of that is Candida krusei, as it is known in the clinic. But nowadays it's named Spighia kutsirafsevi, but we know it also from a long time ago as Isaschenkia orientalis or Candida glycerinogenus.
Hello everyone, my name is Zhang. I'm from the Johns Hopkins Hospital and the Johns Hopkins School of Medicine in the United States. It's my great pleasure and honor to join Ferry, Hagen, to briefly speak about Canada taxonomy and nomenclature. As Ferry has very nicely illustrated, newly proposed name changes may improve taxonomy accuracy. However, adoption of these new names into clinical practice may pose an unprecedented challenges to healthcare providers. This will impact on diagnostic interpretation. For example, reporting Pichia kutsirafsevi instead of Candida krusei is not familiar to most of the healthcare providers. This would impact on antifungal susceptibility testing results interpretations. As we know, clinical breakpoints and epidemiological cutoff values are currently under the name of Candida. Importantly, this would impact on therapeutic decision making for clinicians who are taking care of those patients with candidiasis. Because reporting non-Candida name would actually pose a risk for clinicians walking away from the established treatment guideline, that is candidiasis. The also important is the impact on the interdisciplinary communication among healthcare providers, particularly for those non-infectious disease trained clinicians who may not heard these names. Therefore, overall, this raises the questions: what are the clinical values? How clinical relevance to have those name changes? And what are the potential risks to be detrimental for the patient care? Therefore, several factors need to be taken into consideration when considering adopting these new names into clinical practice. This would require collaboration among healthcare providers, laboratory personnel, diagnostic manufacturers, who are actually providing fungal database and the library, and then the clinical laboratory is using those to reporting to the clinicians. Health system software developers, particularly for the patient EMR, the electronic medical records. This also requiring helping healthcare providers to understanding the clinical relevance of those name changes associated with the pathobiology and the disease spectrum characteristics of the disease. It is also an important factors, the laboratory practicalities to be considered, because the laboratory really need to have a proper techniques, methods in order to be able to identify those organisms into the species level. This also requiring compatible with antifungal susceptibility testing interpretations following UCAST and the CSI guidelines. Last but not least, this will also requiring the updating the electronic health records and the reporting systems to really make sure the laboratory information system is able to accommodating those name changes. So in order to bridge the taxonomy accuracy and adoption of those name changes into clinical practice, a group of people, including fungal taxonomists, healthcare providers, medical mycologists, clinical microbiologists, coming together to form an international committee of nomenclature for clinical fungi. This committee is open to everyone who is interested in this topic. The goal for this group is to provide consensus guideline recommendations for fungal name changes for clinical use to ultimately enable high quality patient care. We will be hearing more development on this topic in the near future. So this brings to the end of our presentation. Ferry and I thank you very much for your attention.